We are so excited to be doing an in-person Advocacy and Action program today. I'm Jane Clark. I'm president of our Michigan West Coast Chamber of Commerce, and it's so good to see everyone. I want to do a special shout out also to our virtual attendees. Our highest priority right now is keeping everyone safe and keeping our businesses open. That's why we ask you to wear masks while you're with us today. After you're finished eating, we're going to ask you to put your mask back on. And we're also offering it your way programming this season. So that means if you woke up this morning and it's not a good idea for you to be around people today, we want you to stay home and watch virtually. If you're not ready to be gathering in big groups, we want you to watch us virtually. And so we've got a great group of attendees also with us today, watching from wherever it's most comfortable for them. And the crew doing our live streaming is with the City of Holland. And I want to say thank you to our City Manager, Keith Van Beek, and all the folks from the City of Holland who entered in this partnership with us. And we have a very short video recognizing the City of Holland's video team.
Holland, a true gem of West Michigan. Every day, the city's communication team promotes all the places and people that make our home one of a kind. Our stories are your stories, a window into our community. Our award-winning videos reach over 1 million views per year. Not too shabby. We partnered with the Chamber to bring this event to you live. You know the drill. Follow and like our pages to stay up to date with the latest in our vibrant community.
So thank you, Keith. We appreciate it. We're live streaming this event. For anybody who was at our Wake Up West Coast last week, we also live streamed that. So have it your way with Chamber programming this year. I also want to say a special thank you to Huntington Bank. Once again, Huntington is our sponsor of this program, and it certainly helps us make these programs available to all of our members. And then my final announcement is I am so excited to welcome back our moderator today, Michael Hill from Colbrook Insurance. You all know Michael, and you know what a wonderful job he does as MC for our Advocacy and Action programs. So welcome, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Jane, thank you very much. You will be getting a survey at the end of this, so we look forward to getting your feedback on that. If you want to make suggestions right now, Mike put his mask back on. You're welcome to do that via the survey. At this time, though, I'd like to invite Congressman Bill Heising up in front. Got news last night that he was going to be able to join us, so we're excited that he can give us an update from locally and DC. And cram it all into about 3 minutes, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions.
Sure, happy to do that. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you. I am in full battle regalia here for going back to Washington, D.C. This is how I refer to it. The goal of some this week is to spend an additional $3.5 trillion in stimulus. Next week is, it had been the negotiated time that the Speaker had said would be the vote on the transportation infrastructure bill. That had come out of the Senate, there's a number of factions that have been in this discussion, mostly on the other side, because unlike the Senate, when you're in the minority in the House, you're really in the minority. You've got very little to say about that agenda, there had been a couple of the quote-unquote moderates, some of the blue dogs, if there are a couple of them left, that have been negotiating with the Speaker's office about the infrastructure bill and about the stimulus bill, and they were saying they wouldn't vote for this stimulus unless the infrastructure bill had come up first. The compromised promise was that it would be the week of the 27th, would be that week, so they acquiesced. However, we do have the more progressive side that has said it's $3.5 trillion is the floor, not the ceiling, and that it's going to be the $3.5 trillion. And if they don't have that, then they're not going to vote for the infrastructure bill because they don't think the infrastructure bill is big enough either at $1.2 trillion. 12 zeros, by the way, behind all that. I, for the life of me, am trying to figure out what the problem is that this $3.5 trillion in stimulus is trying to solve. It's not like we need more liquidity in the economy right now. This has been a massive amount of money that has been put in over the past year. We do have a debt ceiling that is coming up. Let me preemptively add that in our earlier CARES Act, which was when we were putting in things like the Paycheck Protection Program and very bipartisan stimulus security bills, part of that was a suspension of the debt ceiling at that point. I fully recognize that was needed. However, as Mitch McConnell has said, with the Democrats in charge of all of the levers of government, House, Senate, and the White House, it is their responsibility to then deal with paying for the additional spending that they are voting for. I concur. So it would have to be something that is unforeseen at this point that would allow me to vote for an increase in the debt ceiling. Having said that, there had been discussions, and still are ongoing discussions. I'm part of a group that some of you we started talking about, I think this, Michael, last year at the chamber breakfast in December. We dubbed ourselves the 30 by 30 group, 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats. We do it this Noah's Ark 2 by 2 thing, so it's not wildly 70-30 one way or the other. We want this to be a bipartisan, solutions-oriented, very focused on the spending and the deficit and the debt. This group has been meeting on a regular basis. We've been trying to have conversations. We looked at ways that we would use the debt ceiling vote as a way to prompt some reforms into our spending and again, we've talked about this over the years, small incremental changes now, which might not have a huge impact in a year, will be very different 10 years from now or a generation from now. Unfortunately, the Republicans approached the Republican leadership, Democrats approached the Democrat leadership. Neither one of those conversations was very fruitful, quite honestly. So it does not look like we are going to have an opportunity to utilize the debt ceiling for some of those hoped reforms. So we're still looking for other areas, other ways that we can do this. I think we have to and need to. So, how about I stop there? If you wanted to do a quick question or two, happy to do that. And continuing to work on Great Lakes issues, continuing to work on border issues, northern border and southern border. So, anybody? Quick question? I caught you napping coming out of August. All right.
One of the things we're going to talk about today is redistricting, and there's a lot of questions that really need to be answered.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you've seen so far?
Redistricting. So, good to see you, everybody. We'll talk to you later. So, elected officials are not allowed to contact the quote-unquote nonpartisan redistricting commission. There was a map that came out end of last week for the congressional side. I know there was for the Senate as well as the House. I believe the Senate has Ottawa County with two senatorial districts. At one point I thought there was a plan that had 4. It was 3. Okay. Currently, the 3? Okay. And the congressional, on the congressional redistricting, also has 3 members of Congress would represent Ottawa County, pretty much meaning nobody's going to represent Ottawa County. And this would have the eastern part of the county would go into a fully altogether Kent County seat. Holland, Zealand, Park, and kind of heading that way, does take in Allendale, would go all the way down to the Indiana border. Port Sheldon and Olive, etc., Grand Haven would go all the way to the bridge. Like the UP, that bridge. Because I actually said that, and someone said, bridge in Grand Haven? I'm like, no, the bridge. Big mighty man. There is, I'm just describing it. I'm not going to comment on it, Mike. I will make the observation that the 7th largest county in the state, getting split up 3 ways, fastest growing county, the quote communities of interest that we have are significant, and we'll see. I know you have an opportunity to comment on the process. They are meeting again this week, where they will refine the draft that's going to be moving forward. We do know that they're going to miss all of their constitutionally appointed deadlines. I don't know what the state Supreme Court does with that. There's no off-ramp that I'm aware of in the language that put the commission in place. So I don't know what, when they miss those dates, what exactly that means. However, I have been told, as we've looked at this, that the final, if nobody's agreeing and all those things have reached an impasse, each of the commissioners draws a map, and it becomes a random draw. That would be then whatever state house, state senate, or congressional seats look like. So my guess is there may be a lawsuit at some point. I'm guessing. Probably a pretty good guess. But we'll see. Anybody else on that happy subject? Well, good to be with you. Looking forward to hearing from Justin this morning, and appreciate the work that he does. The difficult work has become even more so. He and I have had a number of conversations, and as have all of our county executives that we have been dealing with. So appreciate your work, Justin, and looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning, Bill. Keeping our focus on the federal level, we also have Peter Dickow with us this morning, who's going to give us an update on Senator Gary Peters' efforts.
Good morning. It's really great to be back in front of this group, an important forum, and just wanted to say on behalf of Senator Peters, really a big thank you to our host, the West Coast Chamber, Lakeshore Advantage, United Way of Ottawa County, the County of Ottawa, for the way that all these groups, and many more I probably neglected, came together in the height of the COVID shutdowns to take on jobs that were emergency assignments, to get funds out to struggling businesses at a time when they were desperate. I saw the work firsthand, both here, the Right Place, and the Grand Rapids Chamber. It was incredibly impressive the way these groups accomplished this Herculean task for something they didn't sign up for, and executed it extremely well under deadline. And honestly, that's all we wanted to do was say congratulations for that work that I know is ongoing, but thank you and best wishes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is slightly different than when we were together last. That the Chamber has worked to get everybody's feedback, to also minimize the personal interaction while we're still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and so have combined our Public Policy Committee, which oftentimes focused on more local issues, as along with our Government Affairs Breakfast, which is this day. So pivoting to the public policy side of things, I'd like to invite Justin Roebuck up to the front to give us an update on election reform. So those that don't know Justin, he is the Ottawa County Clerk, and got a lot of press both locally and nationally during the election last year, and did an admirable job getting us through that process. Did such a great job that the Michigan Association of County Clerks elected him or voted him as the Clerk of the Year, which is fantastic. So that the 5 previous award recipients get together and determine who the next award recipient is going to be. So certainly a good group of folks to make a great selection of Justin. He's been serving in this role since 2014, and we're excited to hear what you have to say about election reform.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me. It's good to be actually sitting down together in person. It's awesome. Just real quick, want to introduce our staff who's here. Katie Sims, our election coordinator. for the county, very pivotal job for us, as well as Simone Johnson. Simone is a GVSU student, and she's our election intern. We do rely heavily on our internship program in elections in Ottawa County, so thank you guys for being here. We've had a really challenging 18 or 19 or 20 months in the field of election administration, but pretty much in any field, right? I don't think any of us are super, this is not uncommon for any of us. I do serve as the co-chair of the legislative committee of county clerks, as well as a chair of a group called the Council of Election Officials in Michigan, and that group essentially is a consortium of local and county clerks that deal with election issues. And over the past several years, we probably have anywhere from 8 to 10 bills dealing with election administration. Some of those are more likely to go forward than others. Certainly in election years, we could see a little bit more of a peak of that. Since January, we have had 134 bills that deal with election administration in Michigan. That's a lot. My plan was just to go one by one and talk through these. James, we do have this for lunch and dinner. Is that okay? So we'll work on that. Basically, I decided to just take a little bit of a different approach and break it down a little bit, because these are some really critical issues for us and for our communities. And I think it's important to just kind of do a real brief overview. What happened in 2020? That's a very broad question that any of us could ask ourselves at any moment. But specifically, what happened in 2020 in election administration? Talk a little bit about, very briefly, how we got to the place where we needed, or where we have 134 bills dealing with election administration. And then I want to spend most of our time just talking about where is it that we go from here in terms of our advocacy, in terms of our communities and our voters and what they need. And so that's kind of how I'm going to break it down. I decided to kind of pull out the bill numbers. If you want to get a hold of me or any of our legislators, obviously talk about specific bills, I'm always happy to do that, and I know they are. We have an awesome legislative team here, and I'm so grateful for Representative Slott, Senator Victory, Rep. Lilly, Rep. Merriman, Senator Nesbitt's here too, a good friend, and I've appreciated a lot of conversations with these guys, as well as the congressman. We have had a lot of conversation. One thing I'll say about Congressman Huizenga is this guy digs into stuff, and I so admire that and appreciate that in leadership. What happened in 2020? Well, we had a global pandemic. There were really 3 areas that had significant impact on election administration. Obviously, the thing that affected every one of us was the pandemic. Specifically for us, it was a staffing issue, as well as a safety issue, right, for our voters and for the staff working the election field. We had very dramatic changes to our voting laws starting in November 2018, where essentially a voter-initiated constitutional amendment in Michigan did 2 major things. It did other things as well, but it gave us same-day registration for every voter, which, thanks to the legislature, really did kind of refine that, what that looks like, and put some security parameters around that. But we have same-day registration. The other big thing is no reason absentee voting. So it used to be you had to have an excuse to vote in Michigan. Now you do not, and that opened it up, and we knew that was going to open it up based on data from other states and what we're seeing, where other states have gone through a similar legislative process. And then we had significant misinformation and disinformation leading up to the general election. And I think there is definitely a difference between the two. Misinformation, in my mind, is all the things that just are floating out there in the media. I mean, one good example of this is what we call secrecy sleeves, and a little sleeve that you put your ballot in before you mail it in the outer envelope. The state of Pennsylvania says that you can't have a ballot counted unless you have one of those. So we got hundreds of calls from people wanting to know if their ballot would count because they forgot their secrecy sleeve. Well, that has nothing to do with Michigan law, it's Pennsylvania. But those kind of things happen, and I think specifically return deadlines are another big issue. Some states you can return a ballot 2 weeks after the election. Some states, election night. So misinformation. Disinformation obviously is a little bit different, and I think we could spend a whole other several hours talking about that. I'm not going to. Suffice it to say, we had a lot of bad information floating around about the election, and it was really important to address that for us. Some of the things that we, and I'm not just talking about my office, but our 23 local jurisdiction city and township clerks, these are the things we specifically did to address that. Recruiting additional workforce, making sure that we had the bodies that we needed to conduct an election. Michigan, at the outset, at the beginning of 2020, 70% of our workers were over the age of 65. So think about that in terms of where we were early in 2020 with the pandemic, before a vaccine. That was very concerning to us, and so we moved quickly to recruit additional workers. We adapted our training. A lot of us have had to adapt over the past several months, and one of the ways we did that was going from 100% in person to about 95% online training. For our 1,200 workers, we trained a little over 1,200 workers in a 2-year cycle. Leveraging federal funds to purchase additional voting equipment, that was huge with the volume of mail-in ballots. So we tackled that approach by essentially receiving some CARES Act dollars. We knew that we were going to have a massive influx of absentee voting, and then the pandemic hit. So that was a significant boost for us to be able to purchase additional equipment and make sure that we kind of shifted our paradigm from in-person to mail-in and how we process those ballots. The other thing that was very, very important to me and to our team is to make sure that voters had access to credible, factual, consistent information. So we basically pulled together the FAQs that we were getting out of the hundreds of phone calls that our office took in and said, let's put these down in a format that people can read through if they have legitimate questions about the process. We want to make sure that voters are educated, and you can visit us at miottawa.org/securing the vote. We have had a lot of additional information put on there since November as well, so it's helpful. Just wanted to kind of touch a little bit on turnout and see, based on the numbers. So turnout in Ottawa County, 2020 November general election was 76%. That's one of the highest turnouts we've ever had. The 2008 election was actually a little higher at 78% here in Ottawa. But this was the largest in terms of voters. So we had almost 170,000 people participating in the election. Obviously, we grew from 2008 to 2020. The next slide there, the next chart there, is very significant because you see the impact of the no reason absentee voting process and the mail-in balloting. So that was a huge shift for us in terms of where our infrastructure and resources had to go to address that kind of a jump in vote by mail. And I just want to touch a little bit on a couple of the factors that I believe strongly contributed to the security of our elections process. I'm not up here to say that we had a perfect election, because we did not, and I'll go into a little bit of that too in terms of where our areas of improvement need to be. But I do think it's important for us to look at a couple of facts regarding the security of the election process in 2020. This was the most audible election in U.S. history. So we had 95% of all voters in the United States voting on paper ballots, which sounds like a whole lot of common sense to us here, but in many states, this was a new shift. This was shifting kind of back to a paper system from where other states had gone. All swing states voted on paper ballots. More post-election audits conducted than ever before, including here in Michigan. We had 251 post-election audits. We had a very thorough one here in Ottawa County where we counted over almost 17,000 ballots by hand to verify the results. They were 100% on. Thorough audits conducted in a number of states confirming the result. I think Georgia is interesting to point out too, because they audited their election and they counted their ballots 4 times. 3 of those times were full hand recounts. The results did not change. We had, it sounds kind of weird, but we had more pre- and post-election litigation than ever before. And the pre-election litigation is helpful because it sets the ground rules, right? We all know before going into this what some of those basic ground rules are, and that's very important. And then obviously the post-election litigation with a lot of judicial decisions confirming that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in the election. So I'm just touching a little bit on where we got, how we got here. We were, as most of you guys probably, I mean, more than a few nerds in this room, I'm sure a lot of us were watching election results, right? We were in our office, had on the news station, and it was very palatable. About midnight or so, we began to hear these election results and the integrity of the process come into question. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of questions beforehand, but specifically, on election night, we had a lot of questioning of that process, and that really overflowed into hours of testimony in front of the House and Senate oversight committees here in Michigan, of course, around the country. They spent a lot of time looking at this, a lot of time hearing testimony. And I will say, you know, without getting into too much detail, a lot of things being said from folks who were approaching the challenging process, from election challenging, not understanding what they were seeing. A lot of other things that needed to be fixed, and a lot of things that needed to be addressed. And so there was both mixed in there. And really out of that grew this legislative response, right, to we've got to do something. We've got to take a look at what needs to change here in Michigan. So I kind of want to spend a little bit of time doing that. And I also don't want to think what is the cutoff here? Because I 8 minutes, okay. I'm a nerd and I could just go on and on and on about this, so I'm not going to. Specifically, these are some critical areas where I believe election administration needs to improve. And we need the help of the legislature to do that. Obviously, there are a lot of things that require legislative action. So what we did here, instead of listing 134 bills out, just kind of flag the ones that do have legislation introduced. And we can certainly follow up with a more thorough list if you guys want to. Accountability in our training and certification. So that means making sure that election officials have proper training. And also that the training is specifically, we're held accountable to that standard of taking that training. And Senator Victory has been a huge support on this as well. He's got a couple of bills that deal with training and accountability in that way. Securing our process. Absentee voting changed how we vote. We need to take a serious look at this because we have more people now than ever voting that way. And so making sure we have proper security on our ballot drop boxes, proper chain of custody. Chain of custody is a big thing that I think I'll be taking a harder look at here locally as well. And hopefully kind of bringing some of our colleagues around the state around to how we can reform our chain of custody processes. Signature verification requirements are really important. There's a bill in Lansing to require the Secretary of State to require training for local clerks verifying signatures. That sounds like a good idea. Election official code of ethics. This is another one of my passions. We have a lot of people in this room. I know we have Judge Bocanegra and Judge Van Allsburg. They occupy a position of public trust, and they have a pretty serious code of ethics that they have to live up to. Election officials do not have a code of ethics of any kind. I think we need to change that if we're looking to professionalize the field of election administration. And so we're working through some processes to look at that. Transparency. Post-election audits. Really good idea for those to be mandatory public. They are not currently. We decided to make ours public in December of last year. If any of you are interested, there's 32 hours of great YouTube footage still available. But we also invited the public in to view the process as well. It's really important. We have pre-election testing that is mandatory, open to the public. So let's do that with our post-election process as well. Access and training for election challengers. One of the things I mentioned, challengers in Detroit and elsewhere were seeing things that really bothered them on election night. Some of those things were valid concerns, and others were representing the fact that they did not know what they were looking at, because in Michigan, challengers are not required to go through thorough training. So for them and for our workers, I think it's going to be really important that we move forward with that. Standards and accuracy, another bill, Senate Bill 295, I believe, is Senator Victory's bill. And that just requires training of election workers to balance the poll book every hour. So it's basically asking, how many ballots do we have? How many voters walked in here? Just doing that on an hourly basis. Here are some areas where we really need support, because this is something that affects all of us, right? This affects our whole community, our ability, our access to be able to vote, and our ability to be able to trust the process is hugely impacted. Election operations represent, on average, 2% of municipal budgets across the country. When you think about that, that's pretty remarkable. And we don't have specific city and township data for Michigan, which we're working to actually collect, because Michigan's a little bit of a different animal in how it's decentralized. But when you look at that stat and realize that we are critical infrastructure, you know, we're categorized by the Department of Homeland Security in the same category as nuclear energy facilities, critical manufacturing, emergency services, and overall, we're spending a very, very small dollar amount on election administration as a whole. And I think, you know, what's really important is it's not just the obligation of the state legislature to fund elections, it's local obligation as well, particularly in Michigan where we have local home rule elections. But it is very important to make sure that we have infrastructure to maintain that. Time, another critical aspect of this as well. We essentially need additional time to process absentee ballots, accurate, and really all of this boils down to two things for me: accuracy and transparency in the process. More time gives us those things. So if we're in, there are 19 states right now in the US that have a secure process, transparent process, to process absentee ballots prior to election day. So we end up with getting results on election night by people who have had a night's sleep and who have not been up for 25 hours, counting ballots and verifying things. That's really critical. The other thing that's a pretty bold move for us, and I think a really important one, Senator Nesbitt has really led on this issue, and that is the move of the August primary earlier in the calendar year. The reason that's important is we have a real narrow window between August and November in terms of the things that have to be done: the ballot printing and proofing process, litigation that has to occur, unfortunately, when we have things that are, you know, getting kicked off the ballot and then added at the last minute. Those things giving us that window of time, as well as auditing the primary election. Very important to give us some more time there. Additional time for the canvass and certification process. Again, we saw this after the 2020 election. Canvassers need the time to do the work that they need to do, and that's really important. All right, sorry, I got two more things. Super quick. Tools. These are some really basic things that we need to be able to look at, just improving our process. And the legislature has introduced a number of these already. So allowing county clerks to remove deceased voters from a database. When we get the death record, we should be able to remove the voter. It's super simple. Right now, that goes through a process that could take up to a month for a voter to come off of the voter rolls. So that's one of the things we really want to look at. Restricting access to the voter files, only those who are election officials, basically not allowing third-party groups into the qualified voter file. Pre-registration of 16-year-olds, it's more secure. It is more convenient for them, and it helps us at the end of the day when we are doing same-day registrations, because that population of folks, those are the guys coming in to register to vote on the same day. I can't not touch on these critical issues as well, because in the volume of legislation that is passed, there are a couple of really critical bad ideas, and I just want to be clear on that. There's a bill out there that prevents the use of drop boxes on Monday before the election after 5 p.m. and on Tuesday of election day after 5 p.m. I think, you know, we're working through this with the legislature. I hope that's not going anywhere, but literally those are the busiest times to use a drop box. So we're forcing a voter to have to either not participate because you can't use the postal system at that point, or to come in, if they can do that during working hours, to a clerk's office to interrupt the flow of all the preparation they are making for the election and hand them a ballot that could be put in a drop box. Inappropriate access for election challengers is a bill allowing for challengers to videotape in the precinct the tabulation of ballots. I would be really ticked if someone tried to videotape me tabulating my ballot in a precinct. Making election challengers partisan only. Don't do that. We have third-party organizations all over the state and all over the country that need the ability to come in and observe elections. Republicans and Democrats welcome, but there's no reason we could limit that to only those two political parties. The bill requiring a photo ID, copy of a photo ID to be placed in every ballot application. This was actually revised. There's a substitute right now that's going in, I think, both the House and Senate versions that would basically just require the last four of a social security number or state ID. And I think that's helpful from the sense that the federal government requires that now on an application to register to vote. So it's kind of meeting the standards that the federal government already sets for voter registration, but it's not requiring you to have a Xerox machine or access to one in order to participate. Definitely not enough time to go into voter ID legislation. Obviously, there is a petition out there called Secure My Vote. We'll be hearing a lot more about that over the next several weeks. And then there's some legislation as well. I would say photo ID makes sense. Photo ID laws are a good thing, and we have a pretty robust photo ID law here in Michigan. I think there are ways that we can make it better. We have a Secretary of State who has access to the driver license file as well as the Chief Election Officer. Let's put a thumbnail of the driver license on the electronic poll book. So we've got that data right there for everyone who has a driver's license. If they forgot to bring it with them to the polls, we've got that data. We're using technology to solve a security problem. And I think that's really important to know. The number of folks who voted without a photo ID and signed a legal document saying they are who they say they are and they wish to proceed and vote in Michigan is 0.0019% of all voters in November of 2020. So we're looking at about 11,000 people out of 5.6 million. But we can solve that issue, I think, with technology. That's what I promise. These are some really good things that voters just need to be successful. And I think we have great opportunities with a number of these bills, as well as just advocacy in general, helping them get to where they need to go. Electronic return of ballots for members of the military. So if you're serving in the military, overseas, on a base, really, those are the guys we need to be, and the women that we need to be ensuring they have access to vote. Senator Tom Barrett has a bill, and I think Senator Ruth Johnson have been co-sponsoring Senate Bill 311 on that issue. Accurate, consistent, trustworthy information. Equitable access to returning ballots. So there's legislation that would either allow or not allow postage, legislation on basically security requirements on drop boxes, but some communities can't pay for them. I think we need to figure out that equity issue in voting and make sure that people have the same playing field, whether that's restricting some things for all. I have my opinions there, but I feel like we need to make sure that we're doing it from an equitable playing field. And then, interesting, we have an early voting option as well in this package of bills. And I think early voting has to make sense for Michigan. Michigan's kind of a unique state in terms of our home rule process. We have over 1,200 cities and townships that handle election processes. I think we can fix a lot of things that early voting may help by doing better with our absentee process. But I think that's also an option to consider when you look at what does a voter need. We try to put ourselves in that customer service mindset. So Again, thank you guys. Sorry for a little bit of a rush through a presentation, but at least it wasn't 134 line items. And please do reach out. We'd love to have conversations and talk through some of these things with you at any time.
Justin, thank you very much. Clearly, we are in good hands in Ottawa County with Justin at the helm of the election process, so thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to invite our state legislators up to the front. We have Senator Eric Nesbitt, who has to leave a bit early today, Senator Roger Victory, and Representative Brad Sloan. Brad, I'm going to swap the name tags here.
Three of us.
Yeah, that's right.
So Senator Nesbitt, since you have to depart a little early and you have been playing an active role in some of the legislation that's being targeted to reforming elections here in the state of Michigan, would you like to follow with what Justin had to say and offer your feedback?
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for the overview, and thanks, Senator Victory, for having me in your district. And,
You're always welcome.
Appreciate the opportunity to be back here at the Holland, seeing people in person. It's a little better than having that millisecond delay and trying to figure out you're on mute, you're not on mute on Zoom. So appreciate the opportunity. But you're right. Talking about, I guess, touching, if you do have a few things to say on redistricting, feel free to go to michigan-mapping.org, and you can go ahead and make your comment and whatever your comments in terms of what you want to see in terms of community of interest. But that's something where be active, be part of the process, and let your voice be heard, because these are the districts for the next 10 years as you go through this. I think Justin touched on a lot of different points through his testimony, but I think something that override is, and I think that you mentioned, is that 2018 radical changes were done to Michigan's election system. Same day voter registration. Before you had to register weeks before you could show up to vote. You had to have a reason to vote absentee. There was a lot of different changes and updates that were made by that ballot initiative in 2008. And then on top of it last year, with the pandemic, that there was the Secretary of State trying to make a lot of changes that actually weren't in the law. Things like mass mailing of the applications for absentee balloting were done. Some things that, some of the litigation that was mentioned before that the legislature intervened on was allowing for ballots to show up to 2 weeks after Election Day. And that was something that, without the legislature through intervention, stopped, and allowing for ballot harvesting, which is actually illegal in Michigan. And so there was a lot of changes that were made on Michigan's election law, or attempted to be made on Michigan's election law, that didn't go through the legislative process. After the election, I believe the Senate Oversight Committee reviewed about 2,500 pages of subpoena documents, 400 pages of testimony, 30 hours worth of hearings. I think close to 100 people testified, and that's what kind of led to this 39-bill election integrity plan. And the areas of focus really was overall protecting your vote, increasing transparency in the process, and improving election day efficiency. And of course, in terms of the media-driven, if it, points of if it bleeds, it leads, and that's all you hear on the news, people yelling at each other. I appreciate the overview, Justin, in terms of, what you view as, some really good stuff, some stuff that can be updated, some stuff you don't like, but it's something where I think there's been a lot more conversations happening than what people see. But it's something where areas of protecting your vote, such as the photo ID for both, for in person, and then talking about what's something that's not just a signature, but something that's specific, identifiable, such as your driver's license or the last four of your social, providing a clear process to remove deceased voters, establishing a clear chain of custody in the handling of absentee ballots, and then banning these mass mailings of these applications, and implementing stronger verification requirements. Transparency, such as really one of the areas that we saw with the social distancing last year and some of the oversight was that when you're 6 feet away or more than 6 feet away, it's kind of hard to read what's actually in the poll books, the tabulations, and other areas. And so providing some definitions that are in there. Then also improving election day efficiency, such as pre-processing those applications that were already done. That's part of the reason for the Dropbox suggestion, is that so that you do have the absentee ballots that are in, so that you can able to process that, so we're able to know the results on election night instead of 2 weeks later like you see in California, or 3 months later like you see in New York. And so this is something where those pieces, some of them have been processed through the Senate and passed on the House. I know the House will continue to process, but those are kind of the larger points. One other thing, off on the election side, but it looks like budget deal is starting to come together. I know Roger and I have some meetings later this morning in terms of the discussions, but it does look like there will be a budget deal that'll come together before October 1st. It doesn't include any trillions. So like out in DC, just B's, but it's something where trying to really look what's sustainable and what isn't sustainable. Because all these Biden bucks and dollars from the federal government just isn't sustainable with the debt and deficit level. And so as we're looking at our own budget, trying to figure out how to make sure that whatever we're spending can be sustainable without large tax increases in the future. So that's a few little updates. So thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much, Senator Nesbitt. Senator Victory is shifting gears to the budget. So last week announced that there's a bipartisan agreement with the governor's administration, but not many details were released, and I think some things are going to be hammered out yet this week. Could you give us a preview of things that might be remarkable or different from previous budgets?
Yeah, well, we are going to be holding a conference committee coming Tuesday, and I will be chairing that conference committee. So I expect Senator Nesbitt to be a yes on this budget. No, that is, so yes, conference committee we held on Tuesday, so we'll be unrolling it all in the large budget component together. We will be presenting that and then going to the votes on Tuesday and Wednesday, wrapping this process up hopefully. And I've been, as a subcommittee chair, a number of these budgets, been very pleased with the process. This is a process that's been hijacked over the last few years, taking a lot of autonomy out of the subcommittee chairs, and I do appreciate Chair Stamas and implementing power back into subcommittee chair. I know Brad Slaw, your subcommittee chair, I'm sure you appreciate this process, and putting our hard work and fingerprints on this budget. And I think this is why I was able to move forward too, as we elevated the subcommittee's budgets to the chairs of the budget office, and they were able to make quick work of it. I know we were able to get most of the issues done at the subcommittee level, and I'm sure, Brad, you were able to do the same thing. There was some minor details or some major areas, and probably hired Edwin or some of the sticklers. Otherwise, Stamas and Chair Albert, and also the budget office were able to hammer those out. I was given some details of this as being conference chair of this here, by him not going to give any details, or if I start giving details out, that committee assignment may be pulled from me. So I would like to still have that opportunity to serve on that committee and chair that coming Tuesday with basically $60 billion coming forward. Now keep in mind, in this process, as Senator Nesbitt mentioned, this is the ongoing dollars. There's still $10 billion on the playing field here, the Biden dollars, and I really do appreciate how the chairs of both the House and the Senate gave us some clear direction as subcommittee chairs to get your basic budget done, move forward that component, and then from there we'll start addressing these more one-time dollars. And there are some aspects in general budget. I had I think some good stuff in there, but yeah, we will still be able to address that going forward in the other $10 billion, address that more of a one-time aspect. So with that process going forward, I'm pretty excited. There's going to be some hiccups. I'm sure we're going to have some counterparts, having some questions on the conference committee, but we'll be seeking that out. And we'll have Senator Nesbitt mentioned too, some more meetings this afternoon as we move this forward.
Representative Slaw, as Senator Vickery mentioned, you've also played an active role in the budget process. Could you talk to us from a House perspective on what we may come to expect in the next couple days as the budget starts to materialize?
Yeah, so my involvement has really been with the corrections budget alone. I'm not involved with the full budget like Roger is in with the conference committee. What was fun is, from my perspective, is we actually were able to bring that corrections budget it's been weeks, it's just been sitting waiting, because we were able to right away hammer out with the department how much we had, what we were able to do, and really we're not much over where we were for the last budget go around, so I was feeling really good that we had not increased the corrections budget at all, and in some places that actually decreased it. I'm looking forward to today, because we will see and hear the whole budget process unfold before us. So at 10 o'clock this morning, I'm going to have a chance to be on a Zoom call with that process to find out where we're at.
Perfect. So briefly, we talked a lot about elections, and right now it was mentioned that there's a ballot initiative that's being worked on gathering signatures, and if enough signatures are gathered, it can come to the legislature and you could adopt it versus letting it go to the people next year. Have you had a chance to look at this ballot initiative that addresses election reform in the state of Michigan? And if you have, do you anticipate you'd support it if it came in front of you? Oh, that's for both of you.
So I've not actually seen the language at this point in time. I'm looking for it. Haven't actually had it in my hands on it. In general, what I understand about it is something that I believe I can support, but I have to do the research.
And very similar to Representative Slaw, have not seen the specific language, but in the spirit of it, I would be supportive of that language if it's palatable with, the details.
Perfect. And we've hit our time, and so that always happens to us here. But I want to just say a big thank you to Congressman Bill Huizenga for joining us, for Peter Dickow joining us from Senator Gary Peters' office. Justin, great job. Appreciate you giving us the update on election reform. And to our Senator and Representative, thanks for being with us this morning. Look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a great day.